Hey people, Shinobi no Kami here. In this fanfic after the Kyuubi attack, Naruto was adopted by Kakashi Hatake, an ex-Anbu captain and a student of Naruto's father Minato. How will this change the little Naruto's life? Will he be spared from the villagers' hatred or will things be the same as in the original timeline? Watch to know. Before we begin, please use the like button and share the video if you enjoyed it. Leave your thoughts in the comments section. Now, let's roll the intro. Chapter 61, Battlefield Konoha. Temari was not having a good day. First was her so-called W, and earlier, she had lost. Everyone had known it, but that boy had just given her the win. Her pride was hurt from that. She would be feeling the sting of that for a while. But that paled in comparison to what was happening now. Gaara had started to release his inner demon sooner than planned. The invasion had to be started earlier, and now she had even more trouble on her hands. She had gone down to get him out of the area. If he fully released here, it would be very troubling. Too many of their own people were in the area. Gaara was supposed to release in the population center of the village, not here. Also, a part of her was worried. It was that small part of her that would always be his sister. Some bonds like that you couldn't get rid of completely. She had never seen him bleed before. He had never been hurt like that before. She had tried to get him to go with her. She pleaded with him to listen to her. But he didn't. He shoved her away, and the look she saw in his eyes told her that if she tried to move him, he would kill her. She cast a look at her other brother at the problem they now faced. Not only was the Uchiha's teammates were here, but a few others as well. Temari pulled her fan as her brother unleashed his newly repaired puppet. Kankuro didn't like the looks of things, with the boy and his dog, the blonde girl, and the fat boy with the others. Plus Gaara was a wild card at the moment too. Alright, I have no idea what's really going on, Naruto said to the Suna team. But whatever you're planning, you can forget it. Hearing that voice caused Gaara to focus a bit. The voice in his head was screaming at him now. It was so loud and commanding. It was calling for blood, for death, to be let out among the world. A voice that never ended, never gave him peace. To Gaara, the days and night blurred together. Only in death, only in the blood he spilled did he find focus. Only then, when he finally felt like he existed in the world. Now a new voice called to him, one from the outside, one that he marked for death. He looked at the blonde masked boy and grinned a savage grin. Naruto Hatake, Gaara rasped out as half his face was hidden behind a hand. I wanted to give your blood to mother for so long now. We've had to wait for so long as well. Tell me, do you hear it as well? Do you hear the voice calling for blood like I do? Naruto was very uncomfortable about this. He had a feeling that Gaara was referring to the fox. Although he did have a talk with it, while training with Jiraiya, it sounded like Gaara talked to his the entire time. He couldn't imagine what that was like. He had only met the fox for a short bit and already he hated it. It was an evil force of nature, uncaring for humanity, only caring for chaos and destruction. No, I don't. It's sealed up nice and tight with a gag. Naruto said, noticing the questioning looks he got from his teammates who were close enough to hear his answer. He really was going to have to explain everything to them after this. He could tell they were already wondering about a few things lately. He had evaded it for now, but he couldn't keep it up forever. Pity, Gaara said as he pulled his hand away from his face. They were shocked to see the skin under the palm had changed. No, in fact it was still changing as they watched it. The skin turned a light shade of brown, as it pulsed and grew out. The eye had changed from green to yellow and looked inhuman. Now veins on the left side of his face, neck and arm were growing as the skin there also started to change. Oh no, Temari said, seeing what was going on. There was no way to stop things now. Kankuro, we need to move. He didn't need to be told twice. Staying anywhere near Gaara in that state he was releasing was suicide. He and Temari left for the stands to gain the high ground. Ino and Choji went after Temari as Kiba and Akamaru went after Konkuro, leaving Team 7 alone with a transforming Gaara. In the Konoha streets, even before the invasion, Anbu had been clearing the streets of enemies while helping Chunins evacuate the civilians. But when the battle signal had started, Anbu could no longer act in secret, they had to attack out in the open. Luckily the enemy were confused by their lack of numbers and lack of people. They never suspected that the Leaf Village had been preparing all this time. Even now a team would be evacuating people at the stadium to an underground bunker quickly created under the stadium. Although from the scattered reports, it was slow going. Apparently the non-ninja were put to sleep. So they had to carry them all down while fighting off enemy forces. Thankfully it seemed that Guy and Kakashi were helping them out. Guy was a good person to have, but for Anbu Yugao Azuki she was more thankful for Kakashi being there. She had only worked with him a few times before he quit Anbu, but everyone knew him and respected his skills. The man was a legend, like Itachi had been in the special services, that is before Itachi's downfall. Now no one spoke that name. She was currently leading her 3 members through a clean-up sweep of an area. So far things had gone mostly in their favor. She could hear battle all around her, she knew that many would be injured and some would die. She knew all too well how swiftly death could come. All this month she had tried to focus on her work, because when she returned home she just broke down and cried her heart out. She had never cried so hard in her life since Hayate's death. Sure, the man looked constantly sickly and coughed all the time, but he made her feel loved in ways no one else had. A hole had been torn into her life, and she was going to fill that with as much blood as possible to those that had taken his life. We should have come into more resistance than this in this area, don't you think? An Anbu with a hawk mask asked her. The other 2 wore a rat and turtle mask. Yugao thought about it, it was odd that they hadn't run into anyone yet. This was still a heavy fighting area, so where were the enemy? They could be hiding, but then where? Inside the homes. She stopped as her team did. She did a slow scan of the area, looking for anything out of place. The place seemed quiet, in fact she noticed that the sounds of battle were more distant now than they had been. That meant there was a sound distortion, but that only happened with something like a genjutsu. She yelled out to release herself out of it. One of her teammates wasn't fast enough as he screamed as blood came gushing out of wounds that suddenly appeared. Rat cried out as he dodged, but a slash on his arm was suddenly there. As the genjutsu dispelled from her, forcing her chakra to release her senses, she saw the enemy slowly start to appear. Sound ninja, all of them, and they had them encircled. With 1 member out and another wounded, she was outnumbered. Still she would give them one hell of a fight as she pulled her sword from its holder behind her back. Then she saw a shadow cross her vision, someone was jumping down from behind her. She quickly turned to parry with her sword, but nothing came. A figure in a cloak with 2 swords attacked 2 of the sound ninja behind her. She didn't have enough time to think as the battle started. It was over in a few minutes, but to her the battle seemed a lot longer than that. She managed to cut down 3 of her opponents before she noticed that all the enemy had either been killed or fled. She saw the rest of her team was unhurt, and the other member was tending to their wounded comrade. She turned to face the cloaked man. Who are you? Geez, forgot me already, huh? A man said with a cough as he pulled down the hood. For Yugao, time just stopped. As the hood was pulled down she saw the face of her lover Hayate. She stood there unable to even think as she saw the impossible. She saw the body, she had buried him, and she had cried and mourned for him. And there he was, alive again. Hayate walked over to her, his face serious. Finally she managed to say something, her shaky voice managed to get out only one word. How? Her voice seemed so small in that moment, her eyes stinging with tears, and she was thankful for the mask she was wearing. She felt him hold her, and it was in that moment she knew it was him. It was really him. She broke as she hugged him tightly, afraid to let him go. Afraid that if she did, he would be gone again. I'm sorry, he whispered into her ear. He felt her shake, knowing she was trying not to cry. Suddenly she pushed him back and slapped him, hard. You bastard. You made me think you were dead. Okay, I deserved that one, he muttered, feeling the sting on his face, coughing again. Look, I was brought in nearly dead. Hell, they told me I was lucky to be alive. They used a cadaver and made it look like me so that I would be considered dead. I didn't even wake up until a few days after they did it, and I had to stay in one of Ibiki's cells for a whole month. I wanted to give you a message telling you I was alive, but they were afraid of a security risk. Yugao was furious, happy, and had so many emotions running through her it felt like a maelstrom inside of her. But she would have to deal with this later. They had a mission to take care of first, plus she needed some time to come to terms with this. And the enemy would be a great way to work out her anger about all of this. We're not done talking. Yakov, I had a feeling about that. He said, although he said it with a smile. After a month away from her, even an angry Yugao would be nice to see again. Under the stadium. Over the month a steel bunker had been built in secret. First Earth users had hollowed out while other ninjas secretly constructed the area. It was a lot of hard work and it wasn't a palace, but it would work. The only door was a thick steel one that matched the wall it was connected to. Gas lamps were overhead to make light and there were many beds already set up. Chunin guards were posted on either side of the door in case the enemy made its way down here. Neji, Tenten and Lee were placing more bodies into prepared beds. So far Guy had told them to help with the removal of all the civilians still asleep in the stands. Thankfully there wasn't too much. Most of the stadium had been either Anbu, or other Konoha ninja prepared, or enemies in disguise. Plus with the help of other ninja assigned to the duty it was going well. Those that had been in the medical room from injuries from the matches were already here. Although they would prefer fighting, this was important too. They couldn't have any of the VIPs from the Fire Country or other nations getting hurt or killed. Neji, a voice called out and said. Boy turned to see his father running carrying Hanabi. Father, is she okay? Neji asked, looking at his youngest cousin. His father smiled as he gently laid her down on a bed. Yes, just asleep. Can you take care of her? I'm needed to ensure that the last of the civilians is brought down. Neji wanted to go with him, but it was his duty to look out for the main branch, plus this was his cousin as well. He nodded his head, not voicing his disappointment in not going out with him. He felt his father's hand on his shoulder as he looked up at the man. You made me very proud out there today, son, he said simply with a smile, and Neji could see the pride in his father's eyes. In that moment, despite everything that was going on, he felt his spirit fly as free as a bird on the wind. Elsewhere in the upper levels, 4 Chunins were carrying the last 2 from the medical wing on a pair of combat stretchers. Mainly they were just a piece of cloth with 2 poles in them. The 2 were the missed genins that had been in the first round eliminations. Man, you think they would wake up with all this going on, one of the Chunin said. Maybe the medics gave them something, the other said as they made their way as fast as they could with the wounded ninja. Although I'm wondering if it also has to do with how they got their butts kicked. Our genins sure did a number on them. Yeah, no kidding, his partner grinned. Hey, how's that girl back there, you two? Better, a female voice said as the 2 Chunin looked to see the girl was back on her feet and the 2 Chunins dead. Their throats looked to have been cut and there was fresh blood on those bandages she had on her arms. What the hell are you doing? One of the Chunins said, then heard a gurgling sound as the stretcher fell on the other end. He quickly turned to see his friend dying there, holding his throat as blood came down. The last image he saw was the genin up and stabbing him in the head with a kunai. As the ninja lay dead at their feet, the 2 missed ninja looked at each other. Well, this isn't what the plan said to do. I still can't believe we were beaten, Amy scowled, clearing pissed at the whole affair. Gendo only grunted, he felt the same way. But still their mission wasn't a complete loss. Although they would have to go back and get his sword from the medical room before leaving, they were done here. They came to accomplish what they needed to do. Although they had lost a teammate, that had been unforeseen and regrettable, but he should have been stronger. In fact, they both needed to be stronger. They thought they were better and they paid for their hubris. We need to leave and meet up with Sensei and fill him in on what happened. Gendo said to Amy as they started to walk down the hallways. Both were feeling their injuries, but they could still battle if needed. With all of this going on, it should be simple to slip out. They're worried about people coming in after all, and as missed ninja, whoever is battling out there shouldn't attack us. What will the Leaf think once we turn up missing or some see us leaving? Amy asked. Gendo only smiled coldly. Then I guess we just have to kill them all so they can't talk. They'll think we were killed or something in the battle. Come on, we've wasted enough time in this village. We need to report back to the Mizukage with what we learned. Arena. Tamari couldn't believe she had to fight 2 people who didn't even make it into the finals. She had seen the fight they had and they wouldn't be much of an issue. Although by the looks of things she wouldn't be getting any help anyway. The few sound ninja that were left were having a hard time with Konoha forces. Not only that, but Konoha's people were taking the sleeping forms and taking them away. They must have had a safe place to place them all, something she would make note of for later. Looking at the long-haired blonde in purple and her fat teammate, she didn't exactly feel threatened. So this is the best that they can send against me. A pretty girl and a overweight genin. I think I'm insulted. What did you say? Ino yelled out, a vein being shown on her head. Sure, she had been taken out, but she had trained herself over this month. Seeing how far she was behind the others, she felt she had to increase her abilities. Even Choji had been working with his father, learning more family jutsus. Ino grinned at the older girl. Besides, it was our teammate, the most lazy ninja in the world, that managed to beat you. He played you the entire time and you only won because he felt sorry for you. Ino smirked, seeing how much that angered the other girl. But Ino, weren't you yelling at him for? Choji was cut off as Ino gave him a death glare. He knew enough not to say anything more. I was going to be easy on you too, but for saying that, you can forget it. Tamari said as she opened her fan. She used it to make a hug gust of wind, knocking the two Konoha genin onto their backs. Tamari smirked this time as she saw what happened. Well, so you wear purple panties as well, I see. Ino sat up and looked to see that her skirt had been blown up, exposing her underwear. She got really red as she realized what happened. Kaya! Ino screamed out as she pulled her skirt down. She heard a noise and saw Choji with a hand over his nose and mouth. His face was all red and there was a little blood coming out between his fingers. Choji, I didn't see anything. The big boy said quickly, trying to save himself. Although to be perfectly honest, he had seen everything. Tamari could only laugh at it, but she saw the battle Gaara was having and she stopped. She had to end this quickly before it was too late. Gaara was already starting to change. If he went full out, she didn't want to be anywhere near this area. She heard someone coming at her and saw it was the two of them. She mentally cursed as she got distracted. Tamari put a lot more power into her wind. Choji ballooned up. His increased size and weight helped to keep him from blowing away. Ino wasn't so lucky. She was blown into a few stands, laying there in a heap, not moving. Ino! Choji yelled out, and Tamari couldn't tell from the way the boy was in the way, but she bet that girl wouldn't get up soon. If she was getting up, Tamari was sure she would have heard her by now. Choji looked back to Tamari with an angry glare as she pulled his arms into his body. Tamari knew this attack. She had a good wind attack, but she wasn't certain about this guy. With the girl out of the way, she could easily deal with him, but she would have to keep from being in front of him. He started to roll towards her, destroying the stands as he went, making a large groove as he went. Tamari jumped onto a chair and kicked off to get out of the way. Only that Choji didn't stop. He actually managed to make a tight turn and was heading back towards her. Tamari growled at this. She had to keep her chakra in check given they were in the middle of a war zone and she might need all she could to get away. She pulled back her fan, ready to attack the ground under him. Maybe if she cut out a trench he might get stuck or something. She was just about to launch an attack when she jerked suddenly. Then she smiled for no apparently reason. Hell yeah, take that, you stupid blonde fan girl, Tamari said suddenly as noticed Choji coming at her. Choji, stop it already. I'm in control now, it's me, Ino. Ino, in Tamari's body, had to jump down a few seats to avoid him. Choji, you bastard. Choji managed to stop himself and return to normal, looking at the girl. Ino, is that really you in there? Here's a hint, she said, going up to him and pulling on his scarf to pull him up a little to her eye level. If you ever mention what I know you really saw earlier, I'll put you on a diet. Yeah, it's you, Choji said as Ino released her hold. It was a good thing she couldn't see you when she blasted you. He thought back to seeing her laying there between seats. At first he thought she was seriously hurt. But she had quickly spelled out what she wanted with hand signs. After quickly getting an idea of what she wanted, he went to work to distract the older girl. So then it was easy for Ino to use her mental jutsu on her, from when Tamari wasn't looking. With Kankuro, things weren't going as he expected. He had to admit that his fight was about even so far. The other boy and his dog were a good match against him. Although Kankuro could use his puppet, only master puppet users could fight with their puppet while using it. He was still too young and inexperienced to try that, but this wasn't the first time he fought more than one opponent at once. But the boy and his dog had near-perfect teamwork. When he went after one, the other would attack instantly. In fact, he was getting a bit annoyed at all of this. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" yelled out Temari as Kankuro paused to look at his older sister. "What? I'm busy here," Kankuro said while keeping his puppet from being smashed, again. Temari jumped down behind him. "Can't I leave you to do anything?" Kankuro wasn't sure, but his sister seemed a bit more bitchy at the moment. Then again, it was hard to tell at times. Maybe she was having her period, she usually did get irritated on those days. Plus, with everything going on, he was getting very frustrated as well. "Look, just give me some wind and I'll finish them off," he said to her. "Sure," he heard her say. What he didn't see was her lifting her fan and slamming it on top of his head, hard. Kankuro fell face first onto the ground, leaving a very confused Kiba there. "What the hell is going on?" Kiba demanded. "It's me, Ino," Temari told him. "I took over the girl's body. Now pick that guy up and help carry him somewhere safe. Choji is looking after my body and I want to make sure this girl is tied up before I release her." Kiba wasn't sure at first, but for some reason he could tell that it was Ino. The way the girl talked and moved was definitely like her. "Well, hurry up, dog boy." Temari, Ino snapped at him. "Yeah, it's her all right," Kiba sighed. Team 7 wasn't doing much better. Gaara was proving to be a major force to be reckoned with. The new skin growing over him was harder than stone. They could stick things like kunai into it, but they couldn't get any real penetration. Then the skin would just seem to eject the weapons a moment later. Also, the other more dangerous part of him was that large arm of his. That arm could shift and change like the sand that Gaara normally used. The large demonic-looking arm flew out, extending impossibly long at Sakura. She only just managed to dodge it. She really didn't want to know how hard that thing would hit her. "Do we have any kind of plan? I mean, I don't know if I have anything that can work." "What about that water thing I saw you use earlier?" Naruto asked as he tried to attack Gaara with his sword. The Suna ninja swatted the boy away like an insect. Naruto hit the ground but rolled. One of the many things Kakashi taught him growing up was not to stay in place in a battle. "I could try, but I need a distraction," Sakura said back as she used her tonfa to deflect an oncoming storm of sand bullets from Gaara. The small projectiles may not be sharp, but they hurt like hell when they hit. She only managed to get most of them. A few hit her body and she knew that despite the light armor she had on, she would be getting bruised up from that. Plus her hands were going numb from the impact they made on her weapons. Sasuke ran forward. "I'll try something I've been working on. It's not perfected, but I managed to get the Chidori down. I had a thought from seeing that Suna girl." Sasuke jumped up as Gaara's massive arm went to attack him. Only this time he came down and stabbed his sword into the sand. He started to gather up the lightning charcoal like he had been taught, but this time he didn't form it all the way. He kept it loose and then sent it through his hand, the same one holding his sword. It wasn't perfected by a long shot. In fact, it would take him most likely a year to get it right at this rate. It was too uncontrollable and dangerous to both himself and to others, but for this moment it might work. The lightning went through the sword, well, most of it, parts of it shot off in various directions. One arc of electricity nearly hit his own face. But the majority of the power went through the sword and into Gaara. Gaara cried out in pain as the electrical power sent through his body. Although the sand helped to take most of it, he still felt the terrible pain. He was about to attack when a small tower of water hit him. The force of it knocked him back as Sasuke jumped off the arm. Gaara was not going to let himself be beaten by something like this. With a savage cry he swept his arm across the field. He managed to catch the pink-haired girl. She cried out in pain as the two others went over to check on her. "You okay, Sakura-chan?" Naruto asked, helping her up. "I think so," she winced. She had caught most of it with her arm, but she was still feeling some pain. Although she didn't feel anything break, she could barely move her left arm at the moment. Plus she must have bruised her ribs slightly too from how they were hurting. "We have more trouble," Sasuke said as they both looked to see that Gaara's transformation was continuing. When they went to check on her, his body had started up the change again. Now most of his body was covered in that new skin, his face looked like that of a monster and a single tail was growing out of the back. Only his legs, which were hardly even seen, were the only human things remaining. I'm going to enjoy killing you all. Gaara screamed out at them, almost happy by the sound of it. I think we're in trouble, Sakura said, seeing the boy. Just what the hell is he? Naruto didn't say anything as he already knew what the boy was. A part of him was wondering if this is the kind of thing he could expect. He never really had drawn on the fox's power all that much. If he did, would something like this happen to him? The thought scared him, of him turning into a monster. Looking at Gaara now, he had to wonder just how lonely the boy had to be. How afraid Suna had to be of him, when they saw him like this. Looking at Gaara's eyes earlier, he had felt something in them. That there had to be a spark left in them, a sense of loneliness behind all that anger and rage. The only question was, could that small part of him actually be reached? Naruto didn't know, all he knew was that his team was in trouble and he could fight and die to protect them. Cage section of Konoha Stadium. Hiruzen Sarutobi was having his own difficulties. Even though he was the third Hokage, he wasn't the young man that he used to be. His body wasn't as fast or as strong as it had been in his prime when he became the first non-Senju member to take up the mantle. Also, his stamina was even in worse shape. Age was the deadliest thing to a ninja's career. No matter how strong you were, eventually age took everything from you. It was a patient beast that slowly gnawed away at you. Or at least it was supposed to, the third Hokage thought to himself as his fight with his one-time student went. Orochimaru, however, didn't seem at all affected, and he was in his 50s. Even Tsunade and Jiraiya slowed down a little bit. But thanks to him using forbidden knowledge, Orochimaru wasn't slowed down at all. In fact, the man had seemed to have gotten stronger. What's the matter, feeling time catching up to you, old man? Orochimaru grinned during a small pause in the battle. Perhaps I should show you something that I've saved for just this moment. You know, I've went through a lot of trouble for this moment. I've thought about all the ways to deal with you. But you know what, I found the perfect way to ensure that your end is poetic. Given that you passed me over for Hokage, what better way to thank you than to use them? What are you talking about? The third demanded, although he had a very bad feeling. He knew of the kinds of things that Orochimaru researched, but he couldn't possibly have done what he was thinking of doing. But then again, his student had fallen so far into darkness that Sarutobi didn't know just how far he had gone. Let's make this reunion of ours more complete, shall we? Orochimaru said as he started to create several hand seals. It looked like some kind of summoning, but it was one that the Hokage had never seen before. Then suddenly out of the ground a wooden coffin started to rise. It bore the number 1 on it. The Hokage's eyes widened as his deepest fears were starting to be realized. If those contained what he thought, then Orochimaru had stepped into the realm that no mortal should have ever stepped into. Then a second coffin rose up. By the time the third one was rising, he knew that he had little time. He couldn't let all 3 rise up, especially if that third one held who he thought it might hold. He used a cancellation jutsu. He wasn't sure if it would work, but he had to try. Pouring as much chakra as he could, it was only a matter of putting in as much chakra as Orochimaru had put into the jutsu. He could feel a tug and pull sensation and knew that he had a chance. He put everything he had into it and saw the third coffin slowly sink back down. He released it when he saw that the coffin was no longer there. He felt the sweat on his skin from the toll it took on him. It took a lot of chakra and stamina to pull that off, but he needed to be done. Oh well, I suppose 2 out of 3 isn't bad. I was looking forward to seeing the full reunion. But these 2 familiar faces should do just as well. I think it's time for them to come out. Orochimaru said, grinning at the Hokage. The lids of the 2 wooden caskets fell forward as the pale figures of the first and second Hokage were seen. Chapter 62, Will of Fire. Near one of the exits of the stadium, Kakashi and Guy were finishing up with their task of clearing out the area of enemy ninja. Guy apparently was keeping score of how many he was defeating, well, Kakashi was too, but he was a bit more aloof about it all. It was at that point that Guy noticed one of their Anbu members in an archway. "Ah, you there? What is the status of the battle?" Guy asked the cloaked ninja. The Anbu slowly came out of the shadows. Things seemed to be going well. Kakashi came up to the man. He didn't know that voice. Then again, someone new could have been added to the roster. But he usually heard about that kind of stuff. Many in Anbu considered him their senpai, after all, so he got a lot of inside information. So how's the weather in Koreaker, still wet and bloody? The Anbu paused for a moment. Of course, isn't it always? Kakashi immediately threw a kunai at the man. He dodged it only by a fraction of a second as he clipped the mask slightly. Kakashi, what are you doing? Guy shouted out, surprised the man would attack a fellow leaf ninja. He's not Anbu, Kakashi said evenly as he looked as the man rose up cautiously. If he was, then he would have known the correct response to that statement. Then if he's not Anbu. Guy left it hanging as it really didn't need to be finished. Both he and Kakashi had similar thoughts on the masked man who was pretending to be an Anbu. Most likely he's the little spy we've been watching, Kakashi stated. The Anbu chuckled as he removed the mask. So I was found out after all then? Kabuto asked them. Well, if my cover has been blown, then I suppose that my role here has ended. Just as well, I supposed. How can a member of the Leaf be a traitor, especially one so young? Guy demanded to know. My reasons are my own, Kabuto stated coldly. In fact, he was never really loyal to the Leaf Village. After all, they had killed his family. The only reason he felt that the Leaf took him in was because they felt sorry for him. But sadly I won't tell you that, and I also can't afford to being caught as well. With that, Kabuto threw the cloak at them. When Kakashi sliced through it, the young man was already gone. Kakashi was quick to give chase with Guy right on his heels. The stadium was in good hands, but if they could capture this spy, there was no telling what they could learn. Team 7 was facing a very tough opponent. Gaara of the desert wasn't the normal kind of enemy. But only Naruto knew just what Gaara was. Naruto had lived a good life, while he bet Gaara hadn't. They were two sides of the same coin. Because Naruto had a loving family and friends, he hadn't been as lonely as he knew he could have been. Looking at Gaara, he wondered if he had no one to look after him, if this was something he would have turned into. Looking at him now, it was hard to say how to beat him. Hey, do you have any toads that can be used for this? Sasuke asked him. Not sure, I could try, Naruto said as he bit his thumb again. He quickly made the seals and tried to summon anything he could. What he got was a small orange and very familiar toad. Gamakichi. Hey, what's up? Whoa. What the hell did you bring me into, and what is that thing? The young toad said, hopping on top of Naruto's head. Sakura and Sasuke could only stare at the scene in front of them. So much for that idea, Sasuke said as he had to dodge one of Gaara's attacks again. That skin is too thick for anything normal to get through. I'm not even sure I can use my Chidori can get through it. He thought about using that curse seal, but honestly, given what he was told about it, and who it was from, he didn't trust it. That's it, I'm out of here, and you better not bring me into something like this again, blonde boy, Gamakichi told Naruto before dispelling himself. Naruto sighed. He really didn't expect much from Gamakichi, he was still young after all. I have an idea, Naruto said as he got up. Sakura-chan, Sasuke. I need you two to give me some room. Naruto, what are you going to do? Sakura asked him, being supported by Sasuke at the moment. I have to fight him on his own terms, Naruto said as he looked at the boy. He knew that he couldn't keep things from them, and he couldn't afford to keep this power locked up. Not when those close to him could die because of it. Look, I know you'll have questions, but trust me, I'll answer them when this is over. So there is something you've been keeping from us, Sakura said, feeling hurt at it. Naruto winced at the sound of her voice. I didn't mean to, I only found out about it recently anyway. It's just not something I'm comfortable talking about. Maybe cause I'm still dealing with it. That was partially true, he was still getting used to the idea that he had the most powerful demon the world has seen, locked up inside of a seal on his stomach. Another was just how they would react to it. Just do what you have to already, we'll worry about whatever it is later, Sasuke said, not really caring at the moment what was going on. They had more important things to worry about, like not dying for one. Naruto nodded once and walked towards Gaara. Gaara. Oh, what is it? You finally decided to show me the real you? Gaara asked him, grinning. He was looking forward to fighting him. He had never met another demon host before. Killing him would please Mother, and also ensure that he existed in the world. This is the real me, Naruto declared. I know you have something inside of you as well, just like me. But that thing inside of me, that isn't the real me, it's just my prisoner. How can you call it that? Gaara asked him. You speak as though you hate it, you should love it as no one else will love you. Love yourself, because no one else will, that is my way. Naruto looked at him with pity. He couldn't even imagine what Gaara could have gone through to feel like this. How alone in the world must you be to feel that no one would care for you? He must feel like he's always alone, that he walks the world as though nothing else exists but himself. You're wrong, Gaara, Naruto told him softly. I don't know what your life was like, but when I look at you I see what I could have become. I don't know why your life was so different. Maybe it was because I did find those that would love and care for me. Lies, Gaara snarled at him. Those that tell you that they love you are only lies and illusions. Gaara could still remember his uncle, the brother to his mother. For the longest time, he was the only one that would talk to him. The only one that seemed to care for him. Whenever Gaara had a problem he could always go to him, talk to him. He felt safe with him, he felt the only love in his life from his uncle. But that had all been a lie. The man had tried to kill him as a child. All because the man that Gaara thought loved him, had really hated him all his life. When he looked at Gaara, he didn't see family, only the murderer of his sister. That was the night everything changed for Gaara. That was when he finally saw the truth of life. Life was pain, death and loneliness. It was a dark and desolate world where you had only yourself to count on. It was a world where the strong lived and everyone else died. You're wrong, Naruto told him defiantly. At first I only had my dad, but soon others started to show up in my life. I made friends and even found a girl that I like and she likes me back. There is no way I can believe that they would ever lie to me about how they felt. I would put my life on the line for all of them, and they would do the same. That's what it means to have precious people, they give you true strength. True strength, Gaara nearly laughed at that idea. Strength only comes from within, but let's test this out. Gaara fired more sand bullets at Naruto, who tried to dodge them, but there were a lot. But that was only a distraction. One of Gaara's arms launched out as Sakura and Sasuke with blinding speed. The hand expanded as the two tried to get away and then split off. Two clawed hands grabbed the two of them and sent them into the wall of the arena. Are you guys okay? Naruto yelled to them. It's hard to breathe, Sakura managed to say. She felt the sand crushing her body and from the looks of Sasuke he wasn't in much better shape. Leave them out of this, Gaara. Naruto shouted as he tried to attack the boy with his blade. The blade was easily blocked by Gaara's tough skin and was thrown aside with a massive arm. He landed hard against the ground, so hard that he felt dazed from it. Gaara took this chance and encased him inside of a sand coffin. The sand wrapped around him like he was being buried alive above the ground. Naruto was in the dark of the sand, there was no light and the place was getting smaller. He felt it was hard to breathe at this point. No, I refuse to die. I won't die like this, my friends need me and Hinata-chan would be sad if I died. I said I would never make her sad and I won't. I won't let my dad lose someone else, I will get out of this. I will fight, I will win. Laughter was heard as Naruto felt his body slipping away from him. What will you do to win, boy? A familiar voice of the demon fox was heard by him. Naruto noticed he was back in his inner world. It was that same dark and damp area where the fox was imprisoned behind its massive bars. Naruto felt like he was floating on some water, he could feel it but he couldn't move his body. What the hell, I didn't call you, Naruto said angrily to the demon. He could see part of its form in the darkness of the cell. The large fox with wild and evil eyes, this was a creature of pure chaos and death. It was a natural disaster given form, like someone put all of the most destructive elements of nature mixed in with hatred for all things in one massive body. You're near-death, brat, that means the walls between us are thinning, the Kyuubi said to him. I don't want to die just yet, so you better use my power. I'll use your power when I say I will, Naruto shouted at him. He never liked using this power, it just felt wrong to him. The emotions he felt with it, Jiraiya had said while training that the Kyuubi's powers might be drawn out through emotions. Hate, anger, all the negative emotions seemed to draw the power out easily. That unsettled Naruto a bit hearing that. The fox roared at Naruto's limp form. Fool, if you die then I die, besides you already use my power. Where do you think your healing abilities come from or your chakra? You drain me of my power every moment you live, what is a little more? Just enough to win, I can sense the power of another, the one tail if I'm not mistaken. Although the Kyuubi didn't know much of what went on beyond the bars, a precaution to prevent him from taking over the host's mind, he could still sense things now and then. Mostly it was when the host was injured, but with another like Naruto here, he could sense the chakra of a tailed beast. After all, they 9 of them were kin, they knew each other from anywhere since their birth. I refuse to lose to him, boy, so you will take my power. The fox leaned as close as he could to the bars as Naruto stared up into one of the massive red eyes. Even if I have to force feed you my power. Normally I can't, but since we're in this state it will be easy. Suddenly red chakra started to seep out of the bars and enter Naruto. He cried out as he felt the power fill his body. He felt like his blood was on fire as the power filled him like he hadn't ever felt before. On the outside Gaara grinned as he was about to crush the boy. He couldn't wait to feel the blood flow onto his sand. Then he would deal with his teammates and then anyone else. He would slaughter this village. He would bath the village in its own blood in honor of his mother. Then the unexpected happened, the sand coffin exploded. Anyone watching was shocked by what they saw. There stood Naruto, his clothing torn and there was some blood on him, but that wasn't what anyone focused on. There was this red chakra surrounding him, his hair seemed wilder and when he looked up, his eyes were red with slits on them. What is that? Sasuke muttered. Seeing this he could feel the chakra coming off Naruto. It was malevolent and evil, which was something strange as that was the total opposite of Naruto. Sakura could feel this too and she had a sense of déjà vu from the forest, only this time the power was larger and even scarier. Up in the stands there were other shocked spectators. Ino and Choji were watching the fight from a safe distance. Temari was awake as was her brother, but both were tied up by the 2 genins. They too saw what it was, but they knew what was going on. He's just like Gaara, Temari whispered out at the sight of it all. What do you mean by that? Ino asked, not taking her eyes off Naruto. Someone she had known for a long time, but since when could he do this? Plus what was up with that chakra? She could feel it from here and it just felt wrong to her. You really don't know anything, do you? Temari spat, still pissed she had been tricked like that by a girl that hadn't even gotten into the finals. Spill it or I'll just rip it out of your mind. And I might accidentally erase a few things while in there, Ino said, although she was bluffing. She could do that, if she knew more about her family jutsus, but honestly she wasn't that advanced in them yet. He's a Jinchuriki, like my brother, you airhead, Temari spelled it out to her. I'm not sure which tailed beast he has, but Gaara was implanted with the one-tailed Shukaku. What? I don't believe you, Ino said back sharply. Naruto would have told us something like this and there haven't been any of those things around here since. Ino trailed off as something in her mind clicked. She thought back to one of Naruto's birthdays. They were a lot younger, she forgot which one, but she remembered how she had seen his stuffed fox toy in his room. She commented on how cute it was and he said something about wasn't cute. Ino didn't remember much, she had completely forgotten about that toy, plus Naruto's birthday also rang in her mind. October 10th, the day the Kyuubi attacked. She knew that from school and she had thought it odd how Naruto's birthday was on the same day when she learned it. Thinking back to the year, it was the same year that he had been born too. But it had to all be just coincidence, didn't it? Meanwhile, Naruto was getting ready to attack Gaara. The chakra cloak around Naruto started to slowly shift and change as it took shape. Slowly a tail started to form as what looked like ears grew around his head. He roared out, a roar so loud that many could swear they heard it that day from blocks away. The roar was so powerful that his mask was shredded by the force of it. His whisker marks were also changed, they were more feral looking, he grew fangs as well. He looked more animal than man at the moment. From nearby, Hinata felt the power and heard the roar slightly over the battle. She wasn't sure what it was, some distant part of her mind did remember that feeling. She felt it that night of her kidnapping, although she didn't remember it consciously. But that night, when she felt that power, some primal part of her always did remember, and that's why she somehow knew it was Naruto and that something was wrong. Hinata, what's wrong? Kurenai asked. Something is wrong with Naruto-kun, Hinata said as she looked back at the stadium. Hinata, I'm sure he'll be fine. Kurenai told her. She knew the girl was worried about her boyfriend, but they had a mission to deal with. But then Hinata just took off, running to the stadium. Hinata, what are you doing? She called after her. Should we go and get her? Shino asked. Kurenai shook her head. they still had things to do, there was still fighting going on. No, but I sure hope she knows what the hell she's doing. Naruto crouched on all fours as the bloodlust of battle was pumping through his veins. Then he charged forward, he moved with such blinding speed that Gaara didn't have a chance to move. Naruto was too fast as he struck Gaara, and the chakra cloak could actually damage the other boy's body as well. The fist that smashed into Gaara actually managed to knock the boy back. Naruto didn't give up though, he was attacking like an animal. He would punch and claw at his opponent. Gaara tried to put up a defense but it wasn't easy. Naruto could burn the sand skin away or just tear it to pieces. Never had Gaara ever battled someone like this, he was enjoying it but he was also feeling something else. Something he hadn't felt in years, fear. Naruto hard large claws of chakra shoot out and attack Gaara, as Gaara tried to use something similar with his sand. But the chakra was just too strong and the sand couldn't stand up to the power of the nine tails. Gaara felt the only way to beat Naruto was to go all out and to even release the demon within. He had only done so twice before but he didn't care, all he cared about was to just kill Naruto Hatake. Naruto however would not let him have the chance to do it. The large red claws came to grip Gaara him on either side. The sand skin was burning from the touch of the violent chakra, then Naruto ripped him apart. Gaara cried out as the sand skin was literally pulled from him. The sand melted away as it no longer could be controlled by Gaara. Gaara himself fell to the ground in slight shock from what had been done to him. He didn't think it was possible to have his sand pulled away in that form. His whole body felt pain as he tried to concentrate. Then one of the claws captured Gaara. He grunted out as Naruto's large clawed hand was slowly crushing the boy. Gaara looked into his eyes and saw the same kind of eyes he had seen before. He had to grin, now that was the true boy he was seeing, he felt. It was odd, how he felt so much fear. He never felt so much fear in his life, and was shocked to know that despite everything, he didn't want to die. He cried out as the large chakra claw was crushing his body. Naruto didn't care about anything at the moment, he just wanted to stop Gaara. He had to save the others, he had to win no matter what. He didn't even really register what he was doing, he just felt the need and the urge to kill him. It was like something deep inside of him was yelling out to kill, and he was going to do just that. Naruto-kun. Naruto stopped as a voice called to him through the fog of anger and rage. He looked to see that Hinata was there and she was crying. Her face had tears falling down as she looked at him and it stopped him cold. Hinata could only cry seeing what Naruto was going through. She didn't understand what was going on but she knew that this wasn't him. This wasn't the Naruto she had been friends with, that she had come to love. She couldn't let him do this to himself, she had to stop him before he did something he would regret. Please stop this isn't you, Hinata said as she slowly walked towards him. Naruto could only look into her eyes, she wasn't afraid, in fact she was in pain. She was in pain because of him. The last time he saw her cry like this, it was the night her mother had died. He had held her as she cried her heart out to him. He suddenly felt sick, he caused this new pain in her, he had sworn to protect her, to never make her cry. He had broken that promise to himself. As she came closer, Naruto felt the anger and the power with it slowly leaving his body. The chakra slowly receded as his body slowly started to turn back to normal. Gaara fell as the chakra disappeared but he couldn't move. His body was too damaged to do anything other than look. He looked on, confused with what he was seeing. She had seen what he was, so why was she crying like that, why was she not running away? Hinata-chan, Naruto said as his mind slowly came back to normal. She bit her lip as her tears increased, she quickly threw herself into his chest, burying herself into the remains of his shirt and jacket. She held him tight as she cried that he was back to normal. I was so worried about you, I thought that I was going to lose you or something. Please don't push yourself like this again, I was so worried about you. I'm sorry Hinata-chan, he said softly, holding her. Gaara could only watch on in silence as he saw the scene in front of him. He wasn't the only one. As Sakura and Sasuke had been freed, they were watching the scene too. Sakura had a small smile on her face seeing the two of them. The Hokage was having a very troubling time with the two recently revived leaders of the village. It wasn't easy to fight those he had known so well, he had looked up to the brothers when younger and now he was fighting them. Sarutobi had no idea how Orochimaru had done this, but this went beyond evil. To disturb the rest of those who had passed on was something that no man should do. It was also during this battle that they all saw what had happened with Naruto. This was not what I intended when I gave each nation one of the tailed beasts, the first Hokage said grimly. I wonder if you can still control them through a host. Orochimaru thought out loud. Well, after we deal with the old fool, we can test it out later. But I think it's time we end things quickly. Orochimaru opened his mouth as a snake holding a sword came out. This was the Kusanagi sword, a weapon of legend that could, among other things, extend the blade to untold of lengths. It was then that the Hokage had to battle for his life. A little later, Team 7 with Hinata helping Naruto, made it to the roof in time to see the Hokage battling for his life. There were a lot of trees in the way from the first Hokage, but they could still make out the battle within. Naruto saw the seal and knew it was trouble. Mainly because Anko threatened to put him in on, the one time when he was 10 and kept bugging her when she was looking after him one day. He saw the Anbu there just sitting there watching. What are you guys doing? Can't you do anything? Naruto yelled at them. One of cloaked figures turned to face him. I'm sorry, but the seal covers the entire area, even under the roof. And the 4 that are keeping it up, they are just as protected. We can't even touch the field. Damn it. Naruto yelled out, getting frustrated. He didn't know much about seals, so he looked to Sakura. Sakura-chan, isn't there anything you know that can help? I mean, you would know more about this, right? Sakura blinked in surprise as she thought about it. I don't think there is anything. The 4 of them are the anchors for this jutsu. If they were to fall, then it will stop working, but they added a secondary layer that is tied in with the first. They're supporting each other right now. As long as their concentration and their chakra last, they can keep it up. Naruto started to think, there had to be a way. He kept thinking back to his dad's words, such as look underneath the underneath. Well, he didn't think that would work out. The only thing under him was the damn building. He couldn't stand to just sit here while the Hokage battled for his life. It just wasn't fair. The old man had always been there for him growing up. He was like a grandfather figure to him. He stopped his foot hard enough to break the tiles under it. Suddenly an idea started to form in his head. Hey, what you said about concentration, could they keep it up if the ground wasn't stable? I don't think so. In fact, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't. Sakura then noticed that look in his eyes and had a bad feeling coming on. Naruto, what the hell are you thinking? Naruto just grinned as he turned to leave. Hey everyone, if this works, I want you all to get out of here. Naruto jumped off as everyone looked at him, wondering just what he was thinking. Sasuke turned to look at the Anbu. If I were you, I'd do what he says. Knowing him, this isn't going to be pleasant. Naruto managed to get to the arena again, now looking at the giant seal on the top. He had to make sure he had enough room for this. If he wanted to break that seal, he was going to do it, even if it meant bringing down the entire building. Naruto wasn't sure he had enough chakra for this. But he had no other way around this. He had to do something or the old man might not make it. Are you sure about this? Hinata asked him. He nodded. He still hated how he had made her cry like that. He would have to tell her everything after all of this. But first, his plan, or what he had hoped would be considered a plan. He gathered as much chakra as he could, anything he could spare. When he was done, he had a few dozen clones. Shadow clones. Hinata said, confused. Just regular ones. Naruto grinned at her as he looked to his clones. You know what to do. Hi, Taicho. They rang out as they rushed into the building. The clones quickly found the major structural areas of the building. Or at least what they thought looked important, since Naruto didn't know much about buildings, but he did know how to wreck things. So anything important looking had a clone or two in there. When they were ready, they all started to explode. It was like a chain reaction. At first nothing happened with the explosions, but soon the entire structure started to fall down. The Sound 4, who had been keeping the seal intact, soon found the ground beneath them coming apart. The seal did cover the ground, but it needed solid ground to stay anchored. With each member starting to fall in different ways, the seal was no longer equally spaced. It was too hard to keep the seal up and keep themselves from being buried alive. So they had to break the seal. Naruto could only grin at the sight of the seal disappearing. He just hoped that the Anbu were ready to help the Hokage. With that, he started to black out. He had used up all the chakra he could and he started to fall to the ground. He felt Hinata catch him, she was saying something but he couldn't make it out. He was just too tired and couldn't keep away until the world went dark. Chapter 63, Aftermath. The first thing that Naruto noticed was the white ceiling. It was kind of odd as he felt he should know it, it was kind of familiar. As his mind started to clear up he noticed other things, like he was in a bed now and he was no longer in the arena. He sat up as he looked around to see where he was. He was in the hospital, that was why it seemed familiar. He hadn't been here in a long time. He also noticed that he wasn't alone. There laying on his bed was Hinata. She was fast asleep while sitting on a chair but her head was resting close to his leg. He had to smile seeing her there. For a moment he was wondering what happened. She's been there the entire time, you know. Kakashi's voice was heard and Naruto looked to his left to see his father sitting against the wall and he could tell the man was smiling at the scene. Good to see you finally up. What happened? Naruto asked him. The last thing I remember was blowing up part of the arena. Yeah, next time try to find a less expensive way to deal with a barrier, Kakashi said, scratching the back of his head. The stadium would take months to fix up, kind of like certain other parts of the village. I'm not sure about everything but here's what I do know. When you brought down the building the barrier went with it. The Anbu were able to help fight with the Hokage. So the old man is okay? Naruto asked hopefully. Kakashi paused a moment. Well, he's alive. He took a nasty sword wound to his chest. Naruto. He was about to do something drastic when you brought the place down. In a way you did save his life as the Anbu were able to help and drove off Orochimaru. I heard that Sakura was helping to keep the Hokage stable long enough for the medics to get to him. Sasuke was helping deal with one of Orochimaru's 4 guards with the Anbu. Hinata stayed by your side when the medics took you. After you were put into recovery she's been here ever since. Kakashi chuckled at that. Her father had come to check up on her from time to time as well. In fact everyone came to check on Naruto so far. Naruto smiled down at Hinata sleeping there and then he frowned. Dad, something happened in the arena while I was fighting Gaara. Yeah, I heard, Kakashi sighed. Looks like you'll have to come clean or lie to everyone. I don't want to lie. Well, that settles that then, Kakashi shrugged. There was really nothing more you could do in this kind of situation. It was Naruto's secret to tell and he would have to tell them at some point. Although given Naruto's friends, Kakashi had a feeling that things would be okay. They had known Naruto for years after all and accepted him as he was. He just wished that he and Guy could have caught Kabuto. With all the chaos of the invasion, the young man had managed to slip away. So far Kabuto's place had been turned upside down, and his adopted father's death was being looked into again. The man had died a few years back by what was originally thought as a complicated heart attack. They would have to take another look at the body at this point. But Kakashi knew they wouldn't find anything. The boy had been a mole for Orochimaru for who knew how long. He had lived here and no one even suspected him. He knew a few people in security that would be sour over that oversight for a while now. That was the only thing odd that had happened either. The mist team had vanished. They were looking for the bodies but there were a few dead Chunin that had been looking after evacuating those injured. Maybe the genin had been taken by Oto as hostages but so far nothing was turning up. Suna of course after realizing that they had been manipulated by Orochimaru weren't happy. There was a total ceasefire while everyone tried to make sense of things. Only a few hours ago word had come that the body of their leader had been found in the desert, and he had been dead for some time it would seem. So how is everyone? Naruto asked his father. Everyone came out fine, Kakashi assured him. There were a few deaths, injuries and other things. A few places would need to be rebuilt but everyone you know seemed to come out okay. Naruto nodded happy to hear that. He figured some people would die in this battle but he was glad that it was no one he knew. It was kind of selfish but he didn't want to lose anyone close to him. He looked down at Hinata's sleeping face and she looked so peaceful. What about Gaara and the others? They're currently being held for the time being, Kakashi said to him. Although they were acting under orders they still were involved in a plot to destroy the village. At the most they will be returned soon. Dad, could I talk with Gaara before he leaves? Naruto wanted to make sure that he got through to Gaara. Looking at the boy in that battle had shown Naruto how he could have become in life if things had been different. Kakashi looked surprised at the boy. That's odd, he's been wanting to see you too. Well, when you're okay I'll take you to him, but I think you have something to take care of first. He pointed to his bed. Naruto looked down and saw that Hinata was stirring a bit. Kakashi got up to excuse himself, they would want their alone time anyway. He left the room and made sure the door was nice and closed. He turned to face Sakura, Sasuke and all of Naruto's friends. He blinked seeing all their faces. Yes. So is the idiot awake yet? Sasuke demanded, but people could tell that he was asking if he was okay. He just didn't want to show concern was all. Oh yeah he's awake but give him a few minutes, Kakashi explained to them all. He needs a little alone time with Hinata. What? This came from Neji, who looked at the wall. He was contemplating looking through it to keep an eye on them. Hinata he trusted, but Naruto, this was the boy that grew up around a porn-reading father and flirted a lot before dating his cousin. Plus he had already heard the rumors of Hinata's father chasing the boy out of the compound a month ago. Don't even think about it, Tenten nudged him with an elbow, reading his mind. He looked like he was about to say something, but the look in her eyes told him it would be too troubling to even try to argue with her at the moment. He just crossed his arms and would keep an ear out, just in case. If Naruto did do anything inappropriate with his younger cousin, then he would feel the boy's wrath. It was the duty of the branch family to defend the main branch after all. So will we finally know what the hell happened to him back there? Ino demanded to know. I mean, we were all told not to talk about it, but it was really freaky. You will all learn, he just wants to tell Hinata first, Kakashi explained as he moved aside. He wandered down the hall a bit and leaned against a wall to look at the kids. So far he could tell they were curious. Anyone who hadn't been there had most likely heard the story of how Naruto had defeated Gaara. In fact, that news as well as how Naruto took down the barrier were already circulating. Thankfully, the part about Naruto using the Kyuubi's power wasn't common knowledge. It had been years since a certain group had tried to harm him, most likely given up. That had always bothered Kakashi. They never did find all the people responsible for those accidents, and the hired missing ninja that attacked him once as a child. How they even got into the village was never fully brought to light. Oddly enough, after the Uchiha clan killings it dropped off. Had one or more of that clan been a part of it? It was a question he had been thinking about for years. Well, at least he was certain that Naruto wouldn't have to worry about his secret with his friends. It was then that he noticed her. She had come up on his blind side again, a little game of hers. He hadn't heard her, but he could feel her presence, that in her scent was unmistakable. Yo, how are you, Anko? He asked and then turned to face her. She had on a slightly annoyed look on her face, just once she wanted to sneak up and surprise him. Her face softened a bit looking at all the genin down the hall. So the brat is up, I take it. Kakashi nodded. He's going to have some explaining to do, but I'm not worried. Good, so no reason to stick around. Anko smirked as Kakashi looked at her confused. She'd put on a sweet and innocent face. It's just the strangest thing, I found this little thing all alone and thought I would borrow it. She pulled open her jacket and Kakashi saw a pink uniform there, and not just any uniform. A nurse's uniform. It's just my size too and I wanted to play with it, Anko pouted. I always wanted to play doctor as a nurse, you know of any way you can help? She asked him in an innocent tone, but her eyes said all that she had planned. After all, it had been a long month since the two of them had had any fun together. Both were kind of feeling the need to get some kind release soon. Kakashi thought about it. Naruto would be still in here for a couple of days for observation. That meant they had his place all to themselves, and since he was in a house and not in an apartment like Anko, they didn't have to worry about the neighbors banging on the walls for them to keep things down. You know, I think I can help with that. Kakashi grinned as she smirked, seeing a similar look in his eye that she had. The two quickly and quietly slipped away. In Naruto's room, Hinata was finally coming around. Naruto grinned down at her. Hey there, Haim-chan. And Naruto-kun. She lunged herself at him, wrapping her arms around him. Naruto could only grin as she hugged him. He couldn't pass this up, so he wrapped his own arms around her. Man, he missed this, the sensation of holding his girl, the smell of her hair. Although he could feel the hair on his cheek, which was odd, he was used to wearing the mask. Maybe he could have someone run home for a spare. He felt a bit naked without it. It was too bad he remembered his being destroyed in the fight with Gaara. "Sorry if I worried you," he said gently to her. It's okay, I'm just glad that you're okay now." Hinata smiled at him. She was just happy that he was awake and he seemed okay. "Naruto-kun, what happened back there? I was so worried with what happened." He sighed knowing this was coming. "I got a lot to tell you. You remember when we got tricked to getting that scroll?" She nodded her head. "Well, when he knocked you out he told me something. I didn't want to believe it at first, but my dad told me everything." He went on to explain how the fourth had sealed the Kyuubi inside of him as a baby, that it was the only way to stop the demon beast. Then he told her how he was adopted and that Kakashi had taken him in on that day. He wasn't sure what her reaction would be. It was a lot to take in, of course. But he really needed to tell her. Of all people, she needed to know the truth. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Naruto said, looking at his hands holding the sheets. "I just didn't know how to tell you. I'm still sort of dealing with this, and also, I wasn't sure if this would work against me with your clan. I want to prove to them that you and me are great together. I also didn't want to worry you about this. It's my problem and I just didn't want to drag you into it. Things were going so well and, well." Hinata looked at him as she tried to read his face. He couldn't have thought that she would reject him for this, could he have? It didn't change anything for her. In fact, she felt so much respect for his burden. He was protecting the entire village and most people didn't even know it. "Naruto-kun, I would never let something like this get between us," she told him softly. "I think you're amazing. You keep the entire village safe at the cost of the danger of keeping him inside of you. I know that you will protect this village and me, so I could never be afraid when you're near. You've helped me to be a stronger person, helped me when I was sad and alone. When my mother died, you've always been there for me. I promise that I will always be there for you as well," she told him, holding him tight. Naruto was at a loss for words. He felt his heart melt at her words and it just felt so nice to know that she would always be there for him. It felt great to tell her and that she accepted it all. He felt like he was the luckiest guy in the world in that moment. He smiled at her as he gently ran a hand over her pale cheek. She blushed a bit as she leaned into the contact slightly. He gently started to pull her towards him. She didn't fight, in fact she leaned in eager to kiss him again. She felt his lips touch hers and she felt great at just the contact. They started to slowly kiss, but her arms and side got tired in holding herself in this awkward position. Naruto noticed and surprised her by pulling her onto the bed. She squealed lightly, but this was far more comfortable. She snuggled up against him, happy that he had trusted her to let her in on this secret. She could tell that it had weighed heavily on him and she would help him carry his burden from now on if she could. It was at that moment the door to the room caved in and in fell several genins. "Damn it, Ino pig, I told you that you were pressing too hard." Sakura yelled at her friend who was laying on top of the pinkett. "I was not," Ino shouted out back. "Someone kept pushing me out of my spot to listen. Sorry, but I wanted to know what was going on," Choji said as he was on the left of the door. "But you were the one that was on top of me. There was no other room left," Ino defended herself. "Don't be too worried," Tenten said as she was one of the few that hadn't been listening in. Although that didn't mean she hadn't tried, but there had been no decent place left. Besides, I think it was when Lee got excited, nearly rammed the door like he had. Lee bowed. "I am sorry everyone, I was just so excited. I wanted to see my eternal rival and wanted to make a grand entrance for Naruto-kun." When everyone had been listening in, or trying to, Lee had been trying to be patient for Naruto to finish with Hinata. Unfortunately, patience was something that Lee never had. When Neji had commented out loud to himself that Naruto was taking too long and better not plan on spending the whole day alone with Hinata, well, that broke something in Lee. He couldn't take the waiting and had tried to listen in as well. Too bad he had ran right at the door and instead of slowing down he rammed himself into it. All the weight and the impact had caused the door hinges to give out. Everyone picked themselves off as they entered the room. Shino and Kiba tried to put the door back, or at least make it look like it was back. They hopefully would be far away by the time someone noticed the door was broken. "Hey, you still don't have your mask on," Ino said, pointing at him. "I wish I had a camera." Naruto scowled at the girl as he brought a bed sheet up to cover his lower face. He really wished he had a mask now. Hinata, when the door caved in and jumped in her seat and had grabbed Naruto. She was still in that place and looking at everyone and in the position she was in, well her entire face went red in embarrassment. Here she was in an intimate position with her boyfriend. Comfortable Hinata. Sakura grinned at her. She couldn't even say anything and the look on Neji's face, well he looked ready to say something to Naruto. But he held his tongue back, he would let it slide but he might have to have a word to him later about how close he was with her. So, how much did you guys hear? Naruto asked. Not much, Sasuke said, they were repeating what they could hear but I think we got the gist of things. Naruto sighed as he went through it all again, exactly as he told Hinata just to make sure that everyone was on the same page. When he found out what was locked up inside of him, how Kakashi had told him that he was adopted, everything, it kind of felt good getting it all out of the way honestly. So he waited for the reactions. So why didn't you tell us this until now? Sakura asked annoyed he would keep this to himself. We're your friends you know. Although on the inside it was kind of freaky to know that Naruto Hatake held the most powerful demon beast in all history inside of him. You know I've always wondered why the history never said how the fourth managed to defeat the Kyuubi, Shikamaru shrugged. It always bugged me but I never really thought to look into it. I figured either no one really knew or it was some kind of secret. And being adopted makes sense, Kiba said thinking about it all. You don't smell like Kakashi. Huh, Naruto blinked at that. Everyone smells a bit like their relatives, Kiba explained to him. He and Akamaru had known for years that Naruto and Kakashi didn't share any family sense. But he never mentioned it, he might have been wrong about it plus it was considered rude to his clan to mention. Sense to those not inside of the clan. That also explains why my insects were always cautious around Naruto, Shino spoke up next. They must have been sensing that other chakra you have in your system. Naruto-kun, Lee suddenly shouted out making everyone jump up. You have the greatest flames of youth ever. With your flames you have been keeping this secret and have been holding on to one of the greatest responsibilities ever in keeping the village safe. I can only hope to one day match your glorious and youthful task. Lee gave Naruto his bright smile and giving him a thumbs up, leaving Naruto sweat dropping at that point. Sometimes Lee really went overboard. Naruto was considering to do a hip and cool, Hatake-style blow-off but decided to pass, just this once. It just felt nice to be accepted by everyone, there had been some part of him worried. So you're not freaked out? Naruto asked. Well maybe a little, Ino admitted as she had seen what he was really capable of. But it's not like you're not in control and besides we all know you well enough to know the kind of guy you are. Although I always thought you just took after your mother in looks, at least being adopted explains why you and your dad don't look alike. Oh yeah, Tenten said thinking about it. I thought that as well. Did you ever find out who your biological parents were? Yeah, Naruto said slightly embarrassed. But you can't tell anyone. Why not? Sasuke asked. Although he was silently dealing with the revelation and he would think on it later, it made sense how Naruto could have so much chakra and heal up like he did. So it would seem that Naruto was special, after all, although not of his choosing. Seeing the power he had used in that fight, Sasuke did admit that he felt a bit jealous that Naruto had such power. But seeing how much it was affecting the blonde, maybe there were downsides to it. He would ask him some other time. It's sort of a secret, Naruto said to them. Apparently my father had lots of enemies and if they found out he had a son then they might go after me. So I was asked to keep it quiet because I'm not ready to face them on my own just yet. So you can't tell anyone this, not until I'm ready for the world to know, okay. He looked around as everyone eventually nodded, he took a deep breath. It was still odd to think on this, all his life Kakashi had been his dad, and the man always will be, he didn't even have any memories of his father and mother. But he still felt something towards them, they have given him life after all. Well my mother was Kushina Uzumaki, I only know a bit of her. From the picture of them I keep in my room, she was really pretty with long red hair. My father's name was, well, Minato Namikaze. Minato Namikaze. Sakura asked as she felt she knew that name. Why does that wait a minute? As in the Minato Namikaze. As in the Yellow Flash, the fourth Hokage. What? No way. Kiba shouted out in surprise as the entire room was filled with surprised reactions. Guys keep it down, Naruto said looking towards the door. Just in case anyone might overhear all the commotion. Sorry, Sakura said. But you have to admit, that you're the secret son of, that man, is amazing. I don't think there was any mention of him even being involved with a woman in the history books. I think we know why now, Sasuke said, thinking on it. Since he's such a major figure to the village, they wouldn't want people to know he had a family. Given the last war, there were a lot of people that he pissed off. They would like nothing more than to see him or his family dead for revenge. Man, you can never do anything simple, huh? Shikamaru smirked at the blonde boy. Hey, you know me, I'm just full of surprises, Naruto grinned. Near the border of Fire Country, the two Mist Ninja had been traveling non-stop since their escape from Konoha. It was the perfect time to slip away after all. Both had made sure to cover their tracks just in case, but with all the Suna and Oto ninja running all over the place, it would be hard to track them. They had needed a way to slip out of the village anyway. They didn't need to stick around with a war going on. Plus they could report this. Any weakness in a village was good news. They quickly managed to make it to the coastline to their appointed meeting place. They were currently on a cliff overlooking a fishing village where they would get transport to Water Country. They heard someone coming up behind them and quickly turned but relaxed seeing the familiar figure. He was tall with long dark hair and a sword carried on his back. He wore loose white clothing with a black vest. Where is the third member of your team? He asked them. I'm sorry Seizu-sensei, but he was killed in the exam, Amy said as she bowed her head a little. By who? A Suna genin by the name of Gaara, she supplied. He nodded his head. He knew of the name. The boy was a rising star in the ninja world. It was important to keep their eyes on it. Well, at any rate, losing one man wasn't pleasant, but it happened. He shouldn't feel too bad, as the genin in question was quite skilled. He walked to a nearby tree and threw 2 Chunin jackets to them. You'll need these back, Seizu said to them as they put back on their vests. I can't believe that we had to pretend to be a genin team, Amy said out loud. We had to hide our full skills and even lost because of it. If only there had been a genin team ready for the exams at this time. You know as well as I do that there wasn't a team ready for this, Gendo said, finishing putting on his jacket. The mission was to infiltrate the village to confirm the death of Zabuza, gain all intelligence on the team responsible, find any useful information on the village of Konoha and its defenses. Putting on a show to show off Kiri Ninja's skills to those there was just a bonus. That's right, Seizu said, nodding. Since you two were granted Chunin status by special order for missions like this, you were allowed to compete. Did you find the information you were asked? Amy pulled out a scroll, detailed layout of the village, with the patrols I managed to see, defenses and anything special I saw from memory. You'd think that having foreign ninja in the village for a full month they would keep an eye on us. Although I bet they thought I was just seeing the sights. I think they had bigger issues with Suna and that new village Oto, Gendo commented as he pulled out his own reports. It was a good thing they had the scrolls hidden with their belongings and picked them up on the way out. The hotel they had been in had taken a fire jutsu and most likely would be burned down by now. From what I gathered, it is believed that Team 7 under Kakashi Hatake killed Zabuza. You don't sound totally convinced, Seizu asked, hearing the tone of his former student. He had raised this team from their genin days. Although they were no longer genins, they still called him sensei. It was a sad moment that one student didn't return, but that was life. He still remembered the days when his country would hunt down and purge bloodlines and kill a friend for the genin tests. But those days had long since been fading and he wasn't looking forward to telling them of the new development. It's just a feeling, Gendo said to himself. I feel we should at least send someone to examine the area where he had died to be sure. If Konoha is keeping a missing ninja from our village under protection, it could start a war with them. Not that I wouldn't mind that. In their current state, if they survived the attack they would be weak enough to attack. Unfortunately that may not happen, Seizu sighed. It would have been glorious to take down one of the great ninja nations. Water Country could have expanded into the mainland and used Konoha's location to build a fortress. It turns out we have a new Kage. Who? Amy asked. Maid Terumi. He nearly spat out the name. That twice-cursed bloodline user. Gendo shouted out as he stood up. How in the hell did she gain the Kage title of our village? What wasn't known to many outside of the Water Country was that after the bloodline purges things had slowly changed. With so many other ninja nations having more and more bloodlines, Kiri had started to take them in to train as weapons. It was an idea that many of the older generation didn't like. Seizu himself had taught his students the old hatred for bloodline users. Unfortunately, Mei's skills and abilities had slowly been winning over the younger generations over the past few years. She finally had enough people backing her, that to prevent a civil war, the council bowed down and made her the new 5th Mizukage. It was a bittersweet moment. To the younger generations they had a new leader they would look up to, one that promised change from the old ways of the Blood Mist Village had been. To those like Seizu, it was like drinking acid that slowly ate away at his insides. But the fact was that she was just too powerful. Any that had challenged her openly had been mercilessly killed. He had seen her in action and knew that he could never beat her, not with those 2 bloodlines she had. "I can't believe this," Amy said softly in anger. "I know, but we must bear with it. We may not like her, but she is our leader," Seizu said as he started to walk to the small village on the shore. "Come, we have a long journey and I want to hear your reports in detail." They walked off all except Gendo, who looked back in the direction of Konoha. He may have been on a mission, but one thing was for sure. He would be back one day. He would avenge the slight on his honor by the hands of Naruto Hatake. That would be a name he would burn into his soul and make sure that Masked Blonde would wish he had finished Gendo off when he could have. One day Naruto Hatake, Gendo swore to himself. One day we will meet again, and the next time will not be like the last. Konoha Hospital, Hokage's room. Sarutobi had felt better than he had at the moment. Given the talented medical ninja they had thanks to the breakthroughs from Tsunade, he was still alive. Although his old body couldn't take the strain of such a battle again, he was told. The damage to his body was just too much to handle. He had been pierced through his spine as well, which was why he couldn't feel his toes on one foot and could hardly move that same leg. He was told that he would have to walk with a cane from now on. It was hard to breathe sometimes, and he also had these nasty coughs now and again. He was alive but just barely. If he had been a young man he could recover, but with his age it was just harder to heal his body. Although at least he could watch his grandson grow up. Plus the Hyuga had already given his family a request for a possible marriage between Konohamaru and Hanabi. He knew the two were friends, so it was an interesting idea. But that would have to wait with time. Maybe now he'd also get the chance to see his other son Asuma actually settle down himself. The Hokage had already had his family visit him, and he tried to put on a brave face. Asuma could see through it though, but he said nothing, of course. Sarutobi tried not to sigh. It hurt too much, as he thought about the future. He couldn't be Hokage anymore. It was a younger person's game and he should never have gotten out of retirement. But no one else was up to the task. He had hoped to find a suitable replacement, but the only two he could think of, well, they were somewhat problematic. Jiraiya was busy with his spy network and he had never bothered to train a new student. Plus he supposed that Jiraiya was still looking for that person to train, if he hadn't given up that was. That only left Tsunade. She had problems, but it was time for her to come home. He had allowed her to run off for far too long. He had kept up hope that she would return on her own, but year after year she never did. He supposed that made sense. She always was the stubborn child. But it was time for her to come home and accept the office of Hokage. He had thought about it, as he had nothing else to do but think, and she was the only choice. He certainly didn't want someone like Danzo to use this moment to try and take the position. That old war hawk had been trying to get the title of Hokage for as long as he had known the man. No, he wouldn't allow that man to take the office. He had already sent a message for Jiraiya to come and see him. Since his old student was still here, helping to clean up. It was then that he heard the window of his room slowly open. The old man looked and smiled seeing his student slip into the room. "You really should break that habit," Sarutobi grinned. "It will land you into trouble one day." "Trouble is what I live for." Jiraiya smirked at him and then grew serious seeing the wounds. "How bad?" "Enough to force me out of office again," the old Hokage sighed as he rested in his bed. "I'm just not as young as I used to be, should have given this to a younger person instead of taking it up again. Oh well, that's why I need you." "Whoa there," Jiraiya said holding up his hands, "I'm not taking the office. You'd know I'd be bad at it. I can't do paperwork, hell I haven't even filed a proper mission report in 2 years. I'm busy with my spy network too." The Hokage chuckled, but it soon turned into a coughing fit as Jiraiya went over quickly to see if he could help. After a moment the Hokage managed to relax a bit as his breathing got better. "That's not why I needed you here, there is a scroll on the table over there," he pointed. "I need you to find her, it's time for her to come home." Jiraiya knew who he was talking about. "You think she'll just come back, just like that?" he asked, knowing full well how stubborn Tsunade was. "She might not have a choice in the matter," the old man said sadly. "Try anything you can think of, I want her here by her own choice, but in the end, well, read the scroll." Jiraiya picked it up and scanned it. He didn't like the wording in there and he could read between the lines. "You serious about this? If I don't, then who will lead?" the Hokage asked him. "Besides, if someone like Danzo gets in charge, he might just declare Tsunade a missing ninja just because of what she represents and could be a threat to his power in the future. Even if she plans on dying never seeing these walls again, I know how the man thinks, he wouldn't take that kind of chance." Jiraiya had to nod. He had meetings with Danzo a few times and each time he got a worse and worse feeling about the man. He was loyal to the village, that wasn't in question, but the man's methods and goals were suspect. Jiraiya put the scroll away. "I'll leave in a few days. I'll need to hunt down some leads on where to start. Plus I need you to authorize to send a certain genin with me." "Is this someone I think we both know?" the Hokage asked him. Jiraiya nodded. "I heard he did well, got you out alive at least. I think the boy could use some more training and it's about time I spent more time with my godson. I left him in Kakashi's care and the man raised him well. Now it's time to see what kind of tree had grown from the seed that had been planted." Jiraiya was eager to see just what Naruto could do. Now this was the end of Naruto Hatake. The story of Naruto will continue in Return of Naruto Hatake.